Hi everyone, my name is Riley and I'm going to be talking about point from Kandinsky's point in line to plane contribution to the analysis of the pictorial element. The most important assertion made by Kandinsky is the notion of silence and tension in the concept of point. Kandinsky states, thus we must look upon the geometric point as the ultimate most singular union of silence and speech. By this, Kandinsky is saying a point acts as a kind of transition between actions, in the case of dance and music, or a medium in the case of art and design. Tension, on the other hand, are the forces both internal and external that decide the form, but also symbolic meaning of the point. Inner forces are symbolic and abstract. It is the relationship between silence and speech that is the inner force which gives spoken word meaning, and, as shown in the images, may change the understanding of words if used in an unfamiliar way. External force is the practical use of such an element. It is the period we know as the end of a sentence. External forces often outweigh the internal forces as we learn them from an early age, the utilitarian function of a point without appreciating its symbolism. The external shape of a point can take many forms, and you might be remiss to think a point refers to the smallest unit of measurement. Kandinsky would argue that the external form is actually boundless. While it is small in internal force as a singular unit, a complex external form does not remove the concentric inner forces of symbolism, meaning that a period, for example, could be shaped any number of unique ways, so long as it is applied in the manner one would use a period. The symbolic internal forces of such point remains constant. In its most abstract appearance, a single point is never pure, as Kandinsky would call it. The relationship between plane negative space and point positive space creates what refers to it as a dual note from a single form. Even the simplest of points, which might be basic or proto-elements, can never exist in a vacuum, meaning that there is always a dual note relationship between point and plane, making the most primitive forms extremely complex in meaning. Kandinsky poses a question of a singular point as a viable form of art. The image you see is what Kandinsky refers to as the prototype of pictorial expression. It is as close you can reach to the purest form, yet maintains an inherent complexity from point to plane relationship. It is devoid of qualitative elements which are necessary for art, and utilizes only a single sound form. It is only when more elements are introduced that the piece begins to develop its own internal symbolism. Points in nature exist in extremely complex repeating structures that are infinitely scalable. Nature itself is a series of concentric points, as we see in the image of the cosmos where each star or planet is an individual point whose inner forces are connected through the relationship of space, and at a larger scale, this cosmos can be thought of as an individual point in a larger system of galaxies. Contrast this to the other image which shows point in nature at a microscopic level. This could be taken even further to the atomic level as each atom is a series of points. For more in-depth visual understanding of this concept, I would suggest watching Ray and Charles Eames' Powers of 10 on YouTube. In architecture and sculpture, point is a three-dimensional object, often symbolizing an apex. This can be found most easily in Gothic or Asian architecture, where the pointed arch and pointed roof are a denoting feature of these styles. It is through the intersection of these planes that the points exist. In dance, the body itself is a series of points. From the head to each fingertip, our body can compose rhythm through composition of points. In the case of dance, as well as music, time becomes important to the internal forces of each point on the body. It is through each pause and step that we compose new relationships between point and plane with our body, creating rhythmic expression through abstract representation. Music, like dance, uses time as an external force, dictating not only the form of each point, but also the meaning of each point. Quantitative relationships can be made between each musical note, the pause between them, and the importance or uniqueness of each individual note. Size, placement, and time dictate how point is interpreted in music. When we translate from note to point, it is important to create a relationship between the audible and the physical, the sonic and the material. It is then that we must be able to manipulate the tension of each point to emulate the rhythmic properties of music. If we look at the pointillism movement, which predates the Bauhaus movement, which Kandinsky was a part of, we can see the beginnings of a breakthrough where artists discover how primitive forms can abstract a recognizable image. In the case of pointillism, the individual points hold no meaning to themselves. It is the external form and relationship between the external forces that creates the overall composition. When observing Kandinsky's work more closely, we see that he likes to play with resolution of formal complexity. Across each image, we see the concept of point further intensified until it becomes almost organic in appearance. It is in those works where the internal forces ring loudest, where if we look at the first image, the highly abstract form relies on external forces and the silences of negative space that define the composition. To understand how primitive forms will be applied in the future, we can look to artists like Lori Frick, who uses data to create her works of art. In this way, we are not as far separated from the internal forces as Kandinsky. Rather, Frick's artwork relies on constant fluctuation between internal and external forces. The internal tension, data, is what determines the external form of her art. The idea of point will continue to evolve, as digital and quantitative methods will further influence our thought and creativity. Point is dichotomous in its meaning. When viewed alone, it represents a singular moment or sound, pure in form, but when combined through a variety of complexities is where the symbolic meaning is derived and rhythmic qualities of art can blossom.